Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, we get an insight into the upcoming changes to the roadmap. Star Citizen Live takes us through the future of FPS in Star Citizen. Inside Star Citizen shows off the new throw mechanic coming in 3.11, plus an insight into homesteads found throughout the verse. And finally, the environments team answer all of our environmental questions in a Spectrum AMA. So before we begin, I would just like to thank one of my patrons, Rovax, for upping their pledge to the very top tier. Thank you so much for your very generous support. And a big thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. If you do enjoy my content and would like to help make it even better, all of the links are provided below. So on this week's Inside Star Citizen, they kicked off looking at the upcoming throwing mechanic improvements. This doesn't just apply to grenades, but everything in the verse. They also said that any new prop that comes into the game from now on will be throwable, which, as you can see here, includes things like toilet rolls, food, like cherries, basketballs, and even pumpkins and Pico the penguin. The item's mass is taken into consideration as well, which determines basically how far you can throw the item, and they have completely redesigned how throwing works. Basically, you can press G, which would bring up your grenades rather than throw a grenade, or if you're holding an item, then you can use the right mouse button to throw an item underarm, or the left mouse button to throw an item overarm. Next up, they say, is things like taking physical damage into account, melee weapons and throwable weapons. Now, I really like this method, especially the underarm overarm option, which gives far more choice for getting an item to where you want it to be. You could throw something overarm but at the ground to bounce it along the ground or under something, or you can throw it underarm at a much shorter distance, like over a wall, which would just give a far greater amount of control. So I do like being actually able to choose which type of throw to use. The fact that this throwing mechanic is not just applicable to grenades is very important as well. Being able to throw an item to distract an NPC or a player, like throwing a can, throwing a rock, is vital to stealth. But also a couple of other situations where I think this would really help is being able to throw spare ammunition to a friend while you're under fire and you can't literally go up and hand it to him, or throwing medical items to someone near a downed player so that they can patch them up because the medic can't get to them. All of that is very, very important. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of the AR or augmented reality arc, as I do still think that everything in Star Citizen should be skill-based and that should factor into it rather than giving you a visual aid. But that could change, or it could be a toggleable thing. This is coming in Alpha 3.11, they say, and that patch is the next one in line. After this, there was a sprint report, starting with the lighting team who are converting the new day-night light cycles and runtime probe effects to ArcCorp, which is looking very, very cool. For space stations, the concept artists are working out new EVA airlock access hatches to support the upcoming EVA missions that will require players to EVA outside space stations for missions like investigation missions, repair or combat missions. They did say they will show us more as this feature develops. I don't know when this is coming, hopefully sometime this year, but I'm very excited to hear more on that one. Just expanding these space stations a lot more. I can't wait for when we get derelicts as well. They are working on new defensive turrets to locations like space stations and other places to help protect the location when they remove green zones. Cannot wait for that. It'll be great when the AI are at a place where it'll be actually viable to remove the green zones. We got to see some early concept exploration on the creation of homesteads, habitats and homes for NPCs that will be dotted across the moons and planets of Stanton and beyond. These sketches are just the first step, so although we will see several of them come to life, it does mean unfortunately that many of them will never make it past this point. Do let me know which ones you prefer. This is actually one of the more exciting things for me. The addition of towns, villages, settlements, offering interesting NPC mission givers or trading options, and hopefully one day even the ability to purchase one of these homes and live out our days happily in the middle of nowhere. But finally, we got to see some work on various gigantic rock formations which can be used in multiple locations, including Pyro. This test is purely for structure, scale, tech and process rather than the textures. And personally, I think it will really improve the look of locations, adding a bit more diversity, plus some fun gameplay stuff for flying through them, or like the Daymar Rally. Anyway, that was Inside Star Citizen. It was actually one of my favourite Inside Star Citizens, even though it was only 7 minutes long. But do let me know your thoughts. Let's move on. So on Star Citizen Live this week, they were talking FPS, which includes weapons, systems, mechanics now and coming in the future. The first question, which is a great question, was how are non-lethal weapons coming along? Now they say they have a form of non-lethal damage in the game already, which is stun, which you get knocked out at a certain threshold. This is all part of the melee system. Electron damage is also new, and although this is lethal right now, it does include a bit of stun damage within its own damage type. So this is something they are leveraging and concepting now, and as you can see in this image, they have come up with a non-lethal taser. This obviously will be great for bounty hunting, but down the line they may include things like flechette guns to deliver drugs or poisons onto a target, I suppose like a dart gun, which could then deliver a whole host of damage types. So it's really exciting to see that they have begun on this taser. I'm sure all bounty hunters everywhere will be rejoicing. Next question is to do with FPS utility items like shields, decoys and all that sort of stuff. When are we going to get them? Now this is definitely something that has been looked at, and they will look at them again sometime next year. But internally, they see options as FPS devices, FPS consumables, FPS deployables, and FPS throwables. Throwables for the future could be a shield which you throw to the ground and then it deploys. Consumables are your med pens, oxygen pens, or maybe even performance enhancement things. Deployables are things that you would set down on the floor or a wall, like a proximity mine, a trip mine, or again a shield, which will likely be one of the first things to come. So nothing this year, unfortunately, but next year is looking bright. The next question is, will we have a system to equip and distribute ammunition? Now, they are looking into a way to improve the interaction with items around us. So using a swap wheel to pick up and choose where to place on your suit, like picking up ammo off the floor and then maybe swapping it with something else on your suit or placing it into your inventory. They're also looking into item interaction improvements, which will likely be contextual to the situation, and the player interaction system, which is currently just this flat white floating text list that I really don't like, will be replaced with a wheel type system similar to the inner thought menu. That is in progress now, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. It should be good. There are some trading system updates with the external inventory system, which should go live with 3.11. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to involve, but a way to manage our inventories and our external inventories between things like the ROC, I suppose. Magazine stripping and refill and splitting ammunition across magazines is something that they would like to do as well. So having different ammunition in different magazines, this is one of the big things for me as it crosses more into that realistic side of FPS. Hopefully they will get to the point sometime next year where they can strike the original design ideas for Star Citizen's FPS, with Chris Roberts saying it's going to be somewhere in between Battlefield and Arma. Not as arcadey as Battlefield, but not as overly realistic as Arma. Also, eventually our Arma suits will require power similar to the ships, in which they will have components like an FPS radar, scanners, climate control systems, and obviously a power source. For energy FPS weapons, they will have batteries that can maybe attach to your suit, and it can be trickle charged utilizing the suit's power supply. So if you attach an energy weapon battery to your suit, it'll slowly recharge the ammunition. So energy weapons will eventually have finite ammunition to some degree, but I really like this method. I love the idea of your suits needing power, needing to be upkept, and all that tying together. That was a really, really good answer, and I'm excited for that to come. Most likely, most of it won't come this year, though. Someone asked about alien FPS weapons and will we ever get them, and they say they are still building out the human manufacturers first, then they will look into building out more exotic alien weapons. We are seeing more exotic weapons come to life. These are obviously human manufactured weapons like the Lightning company or the Lightning Bolt company, but this will help when it comes to making alien weapons. Someone asked if they could give us a firing range. I would absolutely love a firing range to get some more practice in. It is something that they would like to introduce into the shops in the verse that sell weapons, but they're just not sure when. They do have an internal prototype, but they need to work out certain sort of edge cases like armistice zones and how will that be tied in when they eventually remove them. Next question, are you considering other types of grenades? And they say yes, they do want to do all possible variations like incendiary, smoke, flash, EMP, concussion, radar. EMP would come in when they likely bring in the armor suit power supplies, and it will affect things like that and the helmet hoods. They have spoken about radar grenades as well that emit a signal that can sort of interrupt your ping scanning or put out a fake ping. I like that approach. Next question, is there more coming for weapon customizations in the future, like grips, stocks, barrels, skins, paints? And they say yes, with paints, they are actively talking about this now and want to think of a good way to bring this into the game. So rather than having just a hell of a lot of different skins or paint jobs in your inventory and having to scroll through to find the one that you want, they think that is a very bad method, and I do agree. They want to go to more of a kiosk where you take your weapon and then say, can you paint this colour? It'll get repainted, and then that weapon will be that colour, and if you want it changing again, you'll have to take it to be repainted. Now, I do really like that approach. I kind of feel like it would be a more logical way of doing things and more realistic as well. Grips, they say they were hoping to bring for the first round of customization, but there was an animation issue that will have to be addressed later on. Barrels and stocks is something that they will also do a bit later on as well. It requires a little bit more work to create the different barrels and stocks, so it's not going to be in the foreseeable future, but it is something they will do later on. Next question, someone asked if we will ever be able to repel like we see in the Karak video. And they say there's nothing currently in the works, but they do want to bring this, hence putting it into the Karak video. They didn't just tease us with that and never let us have the option. The multi-tool tractor beam, which I think is slated for 3.12, is being worked on now, which is not just for picking up and moving objects around, but also for moving yourself around in 0G. So it is kind of tying into that system, but yeah, not for a little while yet, I don't think. Next question is, what's happening with the down states and medical gameplay? Now, they said there is a whole slew of health gameplay and death of a spaceman stuff coming up. The health stuff, they say, will begin at the start of the next year, and it will bring different types of down states. This will also work into the bounty hunting mechanic, being able to bound and tie people and then drag them into your hold. Someone asked about bipods, and again, this was planned for the first set of attachments, but they again need to work out the animations of how the player will open and close the bipod and the pivoting effect once it's deployed. So not sure when it will be coming in, but that will really help with some of these heavier weapons. Someone asked if we can get a flamethrower, which I really love that idea, very alien-esque. It's not something that they have written for yet, but with the fire and hazard system being built out, there is no reason why they cannot have a weapon that can create fire, and then the hazard system will just take control of that. They are working on things like plasma weapons, for example, which will need to be more unique, so with impact burns and sizzling away after it makes contact. Some of the weapons will be able to create environmental hazards, like for example the plasma rifle being able to maybe fire a blob which will create a plasma puddle trap, for example, where if you step on it you then get damaged, as well as maybe weapons that create radiation in a certain area, so it is all going to get tied in eventually. Now, someone asked about bullet drop and whether this is actually applicable at this moment, and they say it is in game at the moment and dependable on the gravity of where you are, and recently Theatres of War has been a great place to test range fighting and bullet drop, which was actually apparently way too severe. Coming in Q4, so at the end of this year, is weapon zeroing, which will account for bullet drop, and any sight or scope with weapon zeroing will change for each environment depending on its gravity. It takes the gravity that you are currently at and then offsets it as much as it needs to. It can't account yet for shooting out of a ship with gravity on and then account for the external gravity or lack of gravity, and he said that if you want to perform a shot in which you fire from the back of one ship to hit a target at the other end of the Idris hangar, which is a separate ship, you will need some practice to do that, but it is doable. So range fighting currently has been pretty non-existent for a while actually, and not being able to even see your target at range. I really hope with the continuation of weapon zeroing and Theatres of War that they will be able to make range fighting more feasible and realistic. Someone asked about dual wielding weapons. Now they said there's a lot of complications to get that working. Star Citizen is more towards the simulation side of things, so I wouldn't expect this. But he did say that there is something coming that involves a weapon on each arm or each hand, but nothing more was said about that. And Jared did say that this isn't the Titan suit, so do not think it's the Titan suit. I have no idea what this could be. I would love to hear your thoughts though. Next question, are there plans for different ammunition types like armor piercing, soft point, hollow point, and could you switch to these by just swapping mags? Now they say yes, it is something that they do want for ballistic ammunition. They are thinking about maybe a certain sort of smart ammo which would only be applicable to certain weapons that would also require an underbarrel attachment. but basically this programs the bullet as it leaves the barrel. So if you wanted explosive rounds, you program that in, and then when you fire, it'll give that bullet those characteristics as it leaves the barrel. Then if you want something like armor piercing, you could program that in as well, and it will change the characteristic of the ammo again. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of this, as, you know, the ammo type is what determines its effect rather than a device attached to your weapon. I wasn't really a fan when I heard this. It could work, I suppose, for some really high-tech weapons, but I do prefer the idea of actually having different physical ammunition like in the real world. But I would need to hear more about this idea before I sort of feel like it's a good idea or not. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. Mag stripping is something that they will like. So being able to refill your magazines with another option of ammunition, as long as you are happy to take the time to empty and refill them, then that's up to you. This kind of sort of Tarkov level gameplay is what I really want in. It will just make the FPS mechanic so much more realistic, and I hope that they do take that route. Next question is, have you considered penetration values for weapons? And they say yes, but they can't go too in depth just yet. It's part of the physical damage system, which is being worked on now, which I am very happy to hear about. And they will take a look at the more realistic damage impacts and the materials it hits in the future. It's not something he is working on personally, but they did say that the physical damage system will be covered on weekly shows when it is ready to be shown off. I am very excited for that. Next question is, will there be high-tech weapons like boomerangs or energy swords? And they said if it makes sense to the verse, then they could bring those in. They would need to communicate to the lore team first to see if they could work it out with humans, aliens, and see what works best. Next question, when will we be able to fire out of passenger seats? Now, this was actually on the roadmap a while ago, being able to sit on the back of a dragonfly and actually use your weapon, but it got removed. Now, they do want this, and they will start implementing that next year, but it is not only the ability to shoot from a passenger seat, it is the ability to eat, drink, and shoot from any seat, including passengers or pilot seats, so that should be a really good, robust system. Next question, in terms of FPS meta, what are the plans for armor loadouts? Now, they say they will be reassessing the health system in the future in terms of balance, which is, you know, where are the critical shots, and obviously what sort of incapacitations are there. But right now, they are replicating this by changing and increasing the damage of critical body parts. For armor, they are looking into the design at the moment, and they do want all armor combinations to be viable, so mixing and matching armors are enticing, but at the same time, they do want to provide some sort of bonus for having a full loadout more viable. For example, heavy armor. Let's say that you're wearing a heavy armor torso, helmet, and arms, but you have light legs on because it gives you better maneuverability. You will have no support for all of that weight on your body, which would technically slow you down more so than if you had heavy leg armor, which would provide support. So they are taking a bit more of a logical path to it, but heavy armors may give you the biggest power signals as well on radars, so you light up more. There is a lot to solve there, but again, taking a logical approach is the best way, because then it makes sense to us, and even if it's a skill-based system, if you are a logical thinker, you can kind of figure out the best approach. Next question, is there anything that distinguishes the difference between cover from concealment? And they say, again, this is more to do with the upcoming physical damage system, and this will take materials into account. So something made of thick steel compared to cloth or a bush will make sense to its protection or concealment values. Again, a logical approach. Someone asked why we don't have the P8 AR rifle from Boomerang, which we have seen multiple times on demonstrations, and they say that this is actually a Squadron 42 specific weapon that they want us to experience in Squadron 42 first, along with other stuff as well. There's a lot of stuff that they aren't bringing to the verse yet because they want us to experience it for the first time in Squadron. It will eventually make it to the verse, but just not before Squadron's release. Second to last question, what metrics are being used to gather FPS metrics? And they say that they are gathering a ton of metrics, mostly thanks to Theatres of War, and have implemented a lot of changes already. They have had a look at some of the weapons that are underperforming and will make them more viable by tuning and balancing. This is a constant thing, but they are making massive progress, even from the limited 2 Evocati Theatres of War tests they've done. So final question, what are the plans for melee weapons? And he says, unfortunately, there is nothing in the works right now aside from the Vanduul staff, which I will steal one day. But there are no immediate plans yet. That is something for the future. Anyway, that was Star Citizen Live with the FPS team. Really important stuff being said there, and it actually cleared up a lot of questions I had in terms of the direction they want to go for FPS. For me, the idea of being in between Battlefield 4 and Arma is ideal. Kind of where Tarkov is, but maybe not as brutal. But I'm excited for how this is going to progress, and once we get Theatres of War, it should really help speed up the balancing, the tuning, and the implementation of certain things. So, yeah, let's move on. So also this week, we had a new Kaizen post talking to Imperator candidate Mira Nyao. If you are keeping up with the politics, it is definitely worth reading. We had a new post which showed the timeline of in-law human history from 2075 to the current year of 2950. So if you want to keep up with all of the lore in the verse, that is a good place to start. They released an update talking about the upcoming changes for the Persistent Universe and Squadron 42 roadmap. Now I did cover this in my roadmap update video, which I will link below should you want to check it out. It is all very interesting. And finally, over on Spectrum this week, there was an AMA with the environmental team answering all of our questions regarding the future of Star Citizen's environments. I have also covered this in a separate video, which I've linked in the description below. I highly suggest checking it out, as there's lots to be said. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.